Hello and welcome to the University of Arizona South. In the fall semester of 2001, the undergraduate students of Modern American History conducted a class project to learn about the Korean War. They interviewed 4 Korean War veterans of our community who generously volunteered their time and shared their memories with the students. History came alive, a view of history that is not always found in our textbooks. By employing the methods of oral history, the students learned to record and document the individual human experience and add it to the body of knowledge in our field. They have truly risen to the challenge of conducting not only the first oral history class project of the UA South, but specifically one designed to reach out to the community. On November 8, 2001, at the Fort Huachuca Veterans Recognition Celebration commemorating the Korean War, the students were invited to display their work. They felt privileged to give something back to our community, a community that has been tremendously supportive of the UA South. The following video is a short glimpse into the work of our students. These highlights are intended to honor all our local heroes and veterans, especially the ones that served and sacrificed in the war that is called the Forgotten War.
In the aftermath of World War II, Korea became a divided country along the 38th parallel. War erupted in June 1950 when Communist North Korea launched a massive attack on the South's Republic of Korea. Americans once again responded to the call to defend freedom on foreign soil. For most Americans, Korea was an unknown land.
Well, when the war started, I'm sure 90% of the people, probably including myself, couldn't have put their finger on Korea on the map. And I think even when it was over, 50% still couldn't.
Seoul, Busan, and Incheon, all strange and foreign names, would soon become very familiar to the freshly deployed soldiers. Shipped halfway around the world, many of them were young and had no battle experience. At the beginning, there were hopes to be home by Christmas, but the war would drag on for 3 more years. Entering the theater of war left little time to become acquainted with their surroundings.
I came to Korea in the summer of 1952, and it was hot and humid and it smelled. That was my first impression.
Most soldiers entering the war at a later point arrived as individuals and not as a part of a unit.
I thought it was terrible. I'll be very serious with it because I went over there, and we had a much better system now. I went over then as just an individual replacement. You know, we got on an airplane in New York. We had to report to Fort Lewis, Washington. I mean, you're on your own to get there. And then they put us on an airplane. We had everything from privates to colonels. We just were all put on this airplane, and we flew into Tokyo. But you were an individual. You didn't know anybody. You were just another number. And I don't care whether you were the colonel or the private. You were just another last name and a number. And when we got to Japan, we waited in the airport a while. They put us on another plane and said, we're going to fly you to Korea. Went to Yongdong-po. We arrived there in the middle of the night. They were having a mortar attack and the electricity was out. And they put us in a big building, I always remember, and I always thought, these poor soldiers. I was 26 years old, and some of these soldiers are only 18, 19 years old. Put us in this big building and said, okay, throw your duffel bags and packs down and go to sleep. That was it.
The soldiers had to adjust to a different culture.
Going into Korea was completely foreign. to me, because one is with the way they dressed and their cultural habits. It was a different experience. Although we didn't, during that time, we did not get to mix with them that much, but it was seeing them on the highway and seeing them on the roads and passing them up. You know, their cultural dress was a little weird, and because we were dressed in full winter gear, and you look at the way they were dressed, you was trying to figure out how they would stand in that cold weather out there, because I was cold. It was cold. It was in December. It was cold, really cold, and just trying to stay comfortable in that cold weather. And I just couldn't understand how they did it, and the way they, I don't know, the way they heated their homes and everything was foreign, was different. You know, it was a different culture altogether. And they had this, of course, they didn't have mode of transportation that they have today. Anybody in Korea during that time that had motor vehicles or motor transportation was somebody. They was up in the culture. They were more up in class than the rest of it, because mostly their transportation was by ox carts and donkeys. You know. And you see, and then on that, their buses would run off charcoal. You know. That was an experience. That see how they ran their transportation there. Their public transportation and buses and things ran off of charcoal. They didn't use gasoline, fuel there. So
The soldiers also endured extreme weather conditions.
The weather was bad. It was 30 below, and the heaviest we had was the old field jacket. We didn't have any overcoats or anything like that.
We had winter clothing in 51 and 52. So you can't fight everything.
That's true.
And the weather was the worst enemy of us. We had frostbite and frozen feet and hands. So I say the weather was the worst thing in 50.
The terrain was another challenge.
Remember that?
Very, very hilly. It was rough terrain, one mountain after another. And it was, it was very hilly. And the winters were bitter cold, just bitter cold. I've never been so cold in my life. It would get down to 24 below zero. And we slept in these little, we were in the little tents that had gasoline stoves, and it was bitter, bitter cold.
Did you suffer from frostbite?
No, no.
Did you see anybody that suffered?
Yes, there was some frostbite.
Really bad?
Yeah. Well, bad enough. They issued a thermo boot in those days, which you put on and it had layers of air and so on and so forth. We wore those in the wintertime to keep our feet from freezing. And the summer was very, very hot and humid, in contrast.
Mm-hmm.
For a tank commander, the terrain was especially demanding.
It was a little bit of a blur at the beginning, but we did move northward from there, and I was given command of a tank company, and we had a lot of people. I was in an infantry division, and I don't say this in a derogatory manner, or maybe I do, but they didn't know how to handle tanks, and they sometimes asked us to do things with tanks that we didn't like to do with tanks, which took away our mobility and just made us stationary pillboxes, which wasn't our philosophy. But some of that terrain over there was not very, as you know, well suited for armor. Some wide open places were. And I attached me to the 10th ROK Division. This is Republic of Korean Army Division. And they said, they're up in what they call then the Punch Bowl area. I don't know what they call it now, but it was mountains. And we had these little one-way roads, and here I am with 17 tanks going up, and we got up there okay, but my main concern was that this is where we stay. There's no way out, except to come back down those little roads. And I objected to some of the positions, but we were told that was it. But we spent 2-3 months up there with the, not moving too much, moving around, changing firing positions, exchanging fire. They were about one ridge away, took pot shots at each other all the time.
A military intelligence officer faced different challenges.
We had two sets of enemies. We had North Koreans and we had Chinese. And depending upon where in the terrain you were located, those were your opponents. I was located, the division was located at one time centrally, where we were opposed primarily by Chinese. We had a number of Chinese prisoners whom we had some contact with and who were interrogated. The Chinese, of course, in those days had that theory of using, overcoming our firepower with just lots of people, just pushing lots of people in front of them. We used captured North Korean soldiers as line crossers. In other words, we used South Koreans for that too, but North Koreans we preferred because they could kind of do it better. And what we would do is we would train them to do reconnaissance and low-level espionage work behind, behind the lines. We'd run them through and they'd come back. That give us intelligence.
Comforts of daily life were a luxury during the Korean War.
Korea was a bare bones war. If you're going down the road and you happen to see a big tent that said shower unit on it, you quickly drove in and got a shower because you didn't know when the next one was going to, was that kind of a thing.
Right.
And we did not have elaborate base camps until the war was over. Then we built our own, and we mainly did them with painted rocks and old San Miguel beer bottles and beer caps and things like that. That was our decoration. It was not a comfort war. It was just pretty much live with what you got with you. And of course, being an Army unit, you have a little advantage. You've always got the tanks. You can always heat the rations on the manifold in the back and heat your water back there to shave and things like that. But there was nothing fancy, nothing luxurious. We had a few USO shows. We had three, the 45th Division had three called Madonna Dollies. We had three Red Cross, young ladies in the Red Cross uniforms that were assigned to the division. And they would come around as much as they could. They had a special little rig that had coffee and donuts and sandwiches and some candy bars. And they were good for the morale, just to have them come around. Right. It was good. And we had, they did have some good USO shows. I saw Marilyn Monroe, and I saw Cardinal Spellman. Now those are two diverse shows, I'll tell you, but they were both over there. We had a lot of people that toured. I didn't see Bob Hope. He was there, but he didn't come to our area. But we did have the old diehards came, and it wasn't like World War II where all the performers went overseas and went through the war, the forgotten war, as you said.
Over 7,000 American soldiers were captured and spent months, even years, as prisoners of war.
What my experience when I got captured, what happened is that they threw the grenade in. It was evidently I thought it was a concussion grenade because it wasn't the ones that I seen that came over the hill that were down. They didn't have no fragments to them. So, but evidently one must have came a little closer to me than I thought. And when it went off, the only thing I remember then that I was up in the air looking down at the ground, and that was the last thing I remembered. Then before my next conscious moment was that the Chinese were pulling on my weapon, trying to take my weapon out of my hand. And that's when I know that there was more than one of them around me, so it wasn't that much struggling to do there. We were able to let him have it. Because another Chinese, he didn't have a weapon, but another Chinese came up alongside me with his weapon that did have a weapon and cocked it and told him, motioned to me to let the weapon go. So I let the weapon go, let him have it. And that was the beginning of my captivity. And they had us sitting out on the hill to kind of spread out because they wanted to keep us under the trees and things because of the again, to avoid air attacks by our forces. And I was sitting there by myself there, and I noticed there wasn't nobody paying any attention to me, so I just sat there. And when they were motioning everybody to move down, to pull together and come down the hill, all the Chinese guards had already gone past me, and evidently, I felt that I was unobserved until a friend of mine came over to me and said, "Come on, let's go." And I said, well, I was hoping that we didn't have to when nobody knows me. Once he came over to me, then the Chinese noticed I was there. And then that's when we had to move on down the hill with the rest of the group. But it was my intentions at that time to sit there until everyone had gone, and then I was going to move off in the other direction. But it didn't work out that way.
In POW camps, soldiers combated brainwashing while trying to stay alive.
They were trying to use the segregation issue against us between the two American groups, the blacks and the white, and they were trying to capitalize on this segregation issue, and we were treated a little different. They had classes on teachers to give us literature on Marxism and try to indoctrinate us on their way of life which was a better way of life. Because what we had to combat it was we knew what we had at home. We knew it, even though it was segregated at the time and everything, but we knew that it was better than what they were trying to present to us. Plus, our religious aspect. Whenever the instructors wasn't around watching us, instead of reading the material they give us, we read our Bible. We studied our Bible, and that's what we studied. And even when we wasn't supposed to be having classes, we still relied on our Bibles, the teaching of the Bible. And I guess during that period of time, I would surmise that I read completely through that Bible at least every 3 months. And we've gone completely through it, text by text, took it apart, dissected, evaluated it. And that was our major combat. And then also the truth in knowing what we had at home. We already knew what we had at home. And you could see the country, you're looking at Korea and what we've seen of Korea and the way the Korean people were living. They kept us up on the war effort. We had the one American newspaper there that they let us have on a regular basis, which was called the Daily Worker. I don't know, you might be a little young for that one, but there was the Daily Worker was a communist newspaper being printed in the United States in New York City, primarily in New York City on the West Coast, and they brought that paper in. We got that paper daily. We got current events out of that paper, and what was going on with the baseball teams and everything was printed. It was printed mostly just like the other papers in the States have all the sports events and everything in, but yet their news and editorial was towards communism.
The diet proved to be another challenge.
When the truce talks was going on, that's when the meals really got better. We got really started getting pretty good rations. The rice that was coming in, matter of fact, some of the rice that they brought in there had the American flag on it, so so we were getting some pretty good rice, and that was coming in at that time. Of course, the diet was still always rice and some whatever pork or chicken. They didn't do too much killing of beef over there. Our meats was pork, chicken, and goat. And we, speaking of the diets there, when we started getting fed good there, I remember our first Christmas, everybody got really amused about it. They told us that we were going to have pork, they were going to feed us pork chops, And, thinking American, you're thinking nice size cuts of pork chops and all that kind of stuff there. And when what they did, they killed a pig. They killed a couple of pigs, and getting them out there, and they chopped it up. It was chopped up. That's what they call pork chops. So, yeah. And they chopped up the whole hog was chopped up and cooked and stir fried off and everything. And that was pork chops. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you got to have your play with words there.
The American POWs were finally released in April 1953 during Operation Little Switch, and then in September during Operation Big Switch.
Well, what kept me going was my religious background, my religious faith, my trust in God. And one thing that they taught us and they teach us in basic training was keep faith in your God and country, because they will take care of you. That's all we had to do is to keep ourselves alive. Repatriation. That was about a 3-day deal, because it took us 2 days to move from North Korea by trucks. They moved us by trucks. They didn't put it back on the trains. Then it took them about 2 days to move us from the Yellow River down to the DMZ. And we got there, and we were repatriated. And I think it was General Osborne was the officer that greeted me when I got off the trucks. Got out of the when off the truck, got out of the ambulance, because they brought us in by trucks, and then they moved us off the Chinese trucks and put us in American ambulance, then brought us back to American side. And General Osborne was the one that greeted me there, helped me off the ambulance. He said, "Welcome home, son." I said, "Sir, it's glad to be back. I'm just sorry that it took so long."
Coming home, the dream of all soldiers. A soldier's tour of duty varied in length.
In Korea, they had a point system. If you were actually under enemy fire, direct enemy fire, for 6 days minimum. I was thinking about this the other night after we talked. 6 days minimum, then you could get 4 points for that month. So you needed 36 points to go home. So the doughboy or the soldier who was up in the frontline company, or the tank company, or the artillery forward observer, all those people, they get out of there in 9 months if they made it out, because they were getting 4 points a month, and they get their 36. Then they had the next level back, and this was like the regimental staff and the division staff, and they could get 3 points a month, which meant a 12-month tour, unless they could get down there and get under fire for 6. We used to have a lot of visitors. They'd come down and hope somebody shot at us for a while, so they could get 6 days that month under fire, and they could get the 4. But they were in the 3-point zone. And then when you went back to the higher headquarters, the Corps headquarters or the Army headquarters in Seoul, you got 2, which meant you had about a year and a half tour, which I thought was really a pretty good system. You know, the kid that's living out there in the mud, he's going to get home quicker. He's going to have a more miserable time, but at least he's going to get home. And half the time that his counterpart who's living in the building, sleeping on a cot, eating 3 hot meals a day and all that, he's going to put his 18 months in. Seemed pretty fair to me at the time. It still does, matter of fact.
Interesting. I had a very interesting experience on the way home. We had all of these Allied forces in Korea. You know, we had Ethiopian units, and it was a United Nations operation.
Yeah.
Okay. And we weren't the only ones over there, although we were the predominant United Nations force. But we had French and British and Australians, and we had Ethiopians, and we had Turks, and we had Belgians, you know, battalions, regiments, so on and so forth. And the way they came from their home countries to Korea and went back to their home countries from Korea was by using American transportation. So I was able to get on a boat, a ship, an American troop ship, that was taking Ethiopians and Turks and Belgians and Greeks back to their homeland on rotation. And so we were on the ship. We had to be willing to be on the ship for 30 days. And we were promised that we'd be in New York by Christmas. We spent 30 days and 30 nights on this, taking Ethiopians and Turks and Belgians and Greeks back to their countries. And we stopped in each one of these places and were able to get off the boat and do a little tourism and get back on the boat and go to the next place.
Oh, I was excited, a lot of anxiety to meet my family again, my mother, and we got off the plane. Where did that plane land? It didn't land in Philadelphia. We had to catch a train. Got on a train to come on in. It landed in Pittsburgh. And we had to catch a train from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. And my family was there to meet me at the station there, at the North Philadelphia train station there. And it was a good, memorable sight to be back.
No, I just ask that people don't forget about it, because those kids did as much in that war as anybody did in any other war. They worked just as hard. A lot of them died.